We are going to go ahead and get started. So just as a quick warm up, Dr. Faith, if you can advance the slide, we have a poll for you. And we just wanted to know, how are we feeling today? What is the energy that you're bringing into the room? What's going on? So you can just respond pretty quickly. Like, is it Aunt Viv? I think you might be familiar with the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and I love that we have the original, what we call old school Aunt Viv, and that is Aunt Viv in everyone's mind. And we have Mrs. Frizzle, Magic School Bus. I love that, adventurous teaching through experience. I love Mrs. Frizzle. We have Moana from the self-named album, self-named movie Moana, determined, visionary, leading with heart, which I always thought was beautiful. And then Issa D, just figuring out. We're just, we're going, we're doing our best. We are learning, we're growing. So how are we feeling? Okay. We have, okay. I feel like we have like polarity here. Aunt Viv, okay, it's balancing out. I feel like I should vote too. Aunt Viv energy. All right, we're coming down. We have like another minute, so we still have people coming in. And if you're just joining us, we have a poll up. So just let us know how you're doing. What energy are you bringing into the room today? So Aunt Viv, Mrs. Frizzle, Moana, Issa D. And yeah, we have good participation. All right. Actually, Josh, if I can get you to, yeah, we got 10 out of 10. So if I can get you to, oh, before we do that, so we have Aunt Viv at 40%, Moana at 20%. No one chose Mrs. Frizzle.
Oh no.
Oh, that's okay. And then we have Issa D at another 40%. So okay. All right. So this is good. We know where we're starting. So we'll stop for now. And without, oh, I want to share the results. Without further ado, I am going to introduce our speaker, and I'm so excited to have her. Dr. Faith Mitchell is, oh, can we just,
I don't think I can advance the slide until they, maybe that's it. Like it, let me see. Can I, maybe I can just X this out. Okay.
okay.
My computer, it won't go forward.
Hmm.
Oh, wait, there it went forward. Okay.
Okay. So perfect. Thank you, Dr. Faith. Dr. Faith Mitchell has been a mainstay in Washington, D.C.'s public health space for 3 decades, with a career that has bridged research, practice, and social and health policy. Currently, she is an Institute Fellow at the Urban Institute. She is also actively volunteers with several health-related organizations, including chairing the board of the Jacob and Valeria Langloff Foundation. She is a former funder herself, with previous experience with the Hewlett Foundation as well as the San Francisco Foundation. That is the abbreviated bio, and I don't want to steal any thunder. So I'm going to hand over the presentation to Dr. Faith to talk to you a little bit more about her experience and how to engage with funders in a very dynamic and quite turbulent funding landscape. But you are in good hands, Dr. Faith.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Amber. Thanks, Josh. I'm really pleased to join you. And let me just tell you a little bit about myself as background. I have a doctorate in medical anthropology from UC Berkeley. And in fact, I lived in Oakland for almost 20 years. So I was excited to hear somebody from Oakland is on the call. And I've worked in health policy and social policy and philanthropy throughout my career. Today, I'm mostly going to draw on my experience in philanthropy. As Amber said, I'm an author, which is how I met Amber. My most recent book is the one at the bottom, Emma's Postcard Album, Black Lives in the Early 20th Century, which came out a couple of years ago. And Amber and I had a lot of fun over about a 2 year period promoting the book, and Amber helped me line up podcasts and designed all kinds of cool newsletters and things like that for me. So I'll just put in a plug for her that she's a woman of many skills, and if you need that skill, she might be able to help you. Um, so you could say I've written about health-related topics over the years. That's the scholarly reports that are mentioned there, and also Black history, which is something that I've always been really interested in. And the Book of Secrets is actually a nonfiction, a fiction book, sorry, fiction book, kind of a thriller based on my research in the South Carolina Sea Islands, which I wrote up in the book at the top, Hoodoo Medicine, Gullah Herbal Remedies. So let's talk about foundations. Um, and I'm honored to be the first of the series where you're going to be learning more about working with foundations. I'm going to start at a very basic level. I'm sure that some of you have experiences working with foundations, but still it's really helpful to just have kind of fundamentals, like what are foundations and what are the different kinds of foundations. And, if there's one thing I want you to take away from my presentation is that there is actually a lot of money out there in different forms. And some of that money might as well be coming to you. Like you should have that mentality. I think it's so easy for us to think that money is scarce, but when you work with these foundations, you just realize there's just a lot of money in the United States. We're a very wealthy country. And fortunately, much of that money is in the charitable sector. And so even though we're in a time now where government money is being taken away and state money is stressed, there still are resources out there that you can tap into. And I hope that my comments today will help you do that. So to begin with, I just want you to know that foundations are diverse. So you 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 have several big ones in California that are state-based, like the California Endowment and Wellness, Cal Wellness, and California Healthcare Foundation. That's one type of foundation. I'll come back to those. So you have state-based, you have foundations that fund all over the United States. You have some that fund just in a city. So they vary quite a bit just in terms of how they spend their money. They vary enormously in size. You might have a foundation that just has maybe $5 million in assets and gives away maybe, $500,000 a year or something. You have foundations that are in the billions, like California Endowment, Missouri Foundation for Health, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, MacArthur Foundation. Some of them are just enormous amounts of money. Some have small staffs, one or two people. Then you have some that have like hundreds of people. Some focus on just one issue, some focus on several. So there's just an enormous amount of variety when we talk about foundations. And likewise, there's a lot of variety in terms of how they think about health, which can work for your benefit because, for some, it's providing support for like service providers. For some, it's providing, focusing on like public health and disease prevention. Some of them are interested in research, some in education, just about anything you can imagine. There is probably some foundation that's interested in it. For instance, I was once going to a meeting and I met a woman on the airplane who worked for a small foundation that a wealthy man had started. And I asked her, "Well, what's your focus?" And she said, "We focus on knee replacements because that's what the founder got." I mean, just to give you kind of like that specific, but that's how the money can be used in very specific ways. It can be used in very broad ways and everything in between. So my second takeaway, which I'll come back to, is it's so important to do your research. So the money is out there, but you got to do your research to make that connection between the money and your organization. Let me talk for a second about the different types of foundations. So I think of them in two big groups. You have private foundations, and then you have corporate foundations. And then technically, you also have hospitals that give money for projects. And I didn't include them on this slide, and perhaps you would include them under corporate, but they're all, yeah. But to talk about the private foundations, you have family foundations, often named for the family, like the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Foundation in Northern California. So those are foundations which could be local or they could be national or international, like the Hewlett Foundation where I worked. that are started by some person, Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, that Henry Ford. They want to give money charitably. They often have family members on the board. In many cases, usually what the foundation does reflects the interests of the founder. You have individual donors who are another kind of private, uh, kind of like a foundation, people that you can approach to who are interested in giving charitably to support causes and who can be approached that way. You have what are called conversion foundations. So it's kind of a clunky name, but that name refers to the fact that there's a law that says that if a nonprofit health plan, um, or insurance plan or hospital is sold to a for profit, the proceeds of that sale have to be used for charitable purposes. And that's where the conversion comes into play. California Wellness is a conversion foundation. California Endowment is a conversion. California Healthcare Foundation is a conversion. The SCAN Foundation, which funds in California, is another example of a conversion. All of those started as health plans that were sold to for profits, and then the proceeds were used for charitable purposes. And conversion foundations are always connected to a specific geographic area, excuse me, which could be a city, like if it's a hospital that was sold, maybe the geographic area is just the area that the hospital served. Could be a part of a state, could be the whole state. A lot of times they have the name of the state in their names, like the Missouri Foundation for Health, or like I said, the bunch of them in California that have, the California in the names, or Michigan Health Endowment. And the thing about the conversion foundations is some of them are small, some of them are huge, huge, huge. Uh, and what's important to you as someone who's looking for money is just to be aware that some foundations can only work in a specific geographic area. So that's where your research comes into play to make sure that you fall into the geographic area that they serve. And then another kind of community of private foundation is community foundations. I think there's one called California Community Foundation in Southern California, and then I worked for the San Francisco Foundation, was a community foundation. Community foundations are funded by individual donors. Like I might give my money to the San Francisco Foundation because I don't want to start a foundation, nor do I want to function as an individual donor. I can give my money to the foundation and they will administer it for me. And community foundations are also always connected to some kind of geographic area. So, like the Silicon Valley Foundation was another big one in the Bay Area, where you see that geographic name that tells you it's a community foundation. And then the other big type of foundation is corporate givers, and they also usually have the name of the corporation, like the Levi Strauss Foundation or Pfizer, the drug company, has a foundation. Um, the thing about them is those foundations usually give, and they can give, they can be quite large. They usually give in an area where that company is active. Like CVS Foundation gives money in communities that are served by CVS pharmacies, for instance. Um, and the money that they give is almost always focused on the organizational mission. So, for instance, when I was at Grantmakers in Health, uh, a woman who worked for the Bristol Myers Squibb Foundation was on the board. And that foundation, which is connected with the Bristol Myers Squibb drug company, funded chronic diseases because that's what they were making drugs for, chronic diseases. And so they were interested in chronic diseases in communities. So that's kind of how corporate foundations operate. Some of them, not all of them, but they can be kind of conservative in my experience and shy away from things like abortion, for instance, because they don't want bad press. What they see is potentially bad press. So that's just something to keep in mind with them. So let's talk now about getting started with fundraising. And I've made this transition myself. So I worked for first San Francisco Foundation and then the Hewlett Foundation. And then when I moved to Washington, I was at the National Academy of Sciences, which is soft money, and we had to raise all of our money. And I didn't want to get into fundraising, but I had to. And it helped that I had that background working with foundations. And I actually came to enjoy it to some extent. And so I hope some of you enjoy it as well. Don't if you approach it as an onerous task, you've kind of created a barrier for yourself right away. And I think that's the goal of this series actually is to help you overcome any sort of mental barriers you might have about being a fundraiser. So it for me, fundraising starts with a funding plan. So you need to, uh, sit down with your staff, with your board, and say, what are we raising money for and why? So you can see that just answering that question means you have to think about what you're doing. What is our mission over the next year, over the next several years? What is it that we want to raise money for, and why are we doing this? And the why will become important in terms of making your case with funders. So a funding plan, which I think you'll be probably coming back to in other presentations, is an organized written vision and roadmap that describes the methods and path that your organization will take to bring in grant funds and is developed with employees and board members. So you might say, um, our goal might be, maybe you say, our goal is to get funding from the state for some of the work that we're doing. But we'll start by getting money from local funders who have an interest in what we do, and then we will build on that, use that to hire staff, maybe, or increase our area that we work in, our geographic area, so that when we finally approach the state for funding, we'll have a track record that we can refer to, and we will show that we can manage money and that we have a consistent vision. Like, that's the kind of thing that you could put in a funding plan. It's an internal plan, clearly, that just helps you figure out what you want to do and is an opportunity to engage with your employees and with your board members to make sure that, one thing is you want to tap into their ideas, but also you want them to be on the same page with you in terms of the goals for the funding goals for the organization. Some components of a funding plan include the mission statement, which can sometimes take quite a while to figure out what is our mission. What is it that we really want to accomplish? So you want to start with that. You want to have a realistic budget. And by realistic, I think it's so important. A lot of organizations underfund themselves. This goes back to when I was saying there's actually plenty of money out there. So you should ask for the money that you need, because if you underfund yourself, it's almost like you're hampering yourself right out of the gate. How many staff do we really need to do this? What kind of people, what level of staff? How do we make sure that they are reimbursed appropriately? What kind of space do we need to rent, for instance? What kind of supplies do we need? So that's what realistic budget encompasses. Like, what do we really need to be successful? You want to set yourself up for success. In the funding plan, you also want to think about your funding goals, as I was describing. Do you want to keep raising more money every year, or do you want to just maybe reach a certain level and then just maintain that level? So again, that gets you thinking about what is it that we do and how do we want to sustain it over time. Then you want to lay out your funding objectives, your benchmarks. How much by, year one? How much by year two? How much do we want to raise and how do we want to spend that money? And I know you're going to have a session coming up on budgeting. how much do you want to save? I think it's really important. Even if you have a pretty slim budget, you need to be putting money away so that you have some kind of a safety net. And so that should be part of your funding objectives. Think about your action plan. That should be part of your funding plan, kind of your 3 to 5 year outlook for your organization. And then even within a funding plan, you want to think about how are we going to figure out that we're doing what we say we want to do, and how will we evaluate what we're doing. And if you have that in your funding plan, that's going to be an important part of your proposal too, because funders are always thrilled um, to know that you're going to be evaluating your outcomes. This is a slide that Amber actually developed that I love, thinking like a funder. So after you develop your plan, you want to communicate your plan. And what do funders want to know and why? So there's a couple components here. So um, what funders want to know is like your narrative about your organization. They want to know about your programs and how they align with each other. They want to know about your organization. They want to know about your board makeup. They want to know about your budget. And ideally your funding plan will have gotten you thinking about all of those elements already. And then you can sort of add anything that isn't in your funding plan. But the first thing that came to my mind when I saw this slide was thinking about when I was at Hewlett. Now that was before the internet, so everything was came in by mail. But I would have a pile of letters of intent, so the letter of intent is often the starting point, like where you're just writing a funder and saying, uh, uh, we would like to apply for a grant. Here's what we do. You know, will you invite us to apply for a grant? Some funders require that, like a letter of interest before they will accept a proposal. But I used to have like a stack of maybe 30 letters on my desk. And then I might also have a stack of like 15 or 16 proposals on my desk. And so just think about me sitting there um, and I got to sift through all of this stuff. And it sort of tells you, you as an applicant need to make your narrative and your story sort of compelling and memorable. And I don't use AI myself, but AI actually makes it easier to do that. I think it can help you tell that story. But thinking like a funder means just think about those piles on my desk and thinking, um, I need to communicate my plan in a way that shows that I have thought about it carefully, that I can describe it succinctly and clearly, you know, and it was going to stay in Faith Mitchell's mind for more than 5 minutes. And she's going to go through this whole pile of proposals or letters of intent, and she's going to remember me. Some I and so whatever as you work on this, kind of imagine yourself in that position. And a funder could be any one of us could be a funder. They're not like strange people from another planet. They're just regular folks who are working at these foundations. And think about how you want to communicate with them. So doing your research is an essential part of this, of communicating effectively. And so what should your research be? Each foundation, as I mentioned very briefly earlier, has different priorities. They also have different funding processes. Some will accept like proposals from anybody, anytime. Some have more restrictions on how they accept proposals. So you want to, and fortunately, now you have websites. Because back in my day, when you didn't have the internet, you basically had to know somebody to know what the priorities of a foundation were. But now you can just go online and look at the priorities, look at how they want you to approach them. So you want to do that. You want to figure out which foundations share my priorities. You want to look at how much money they can give, because you don't want to ask for $500,000 from a foundation that normally gives $5,000. So you want to look, they almost invariably have like a tab that shows who their current grantees are and how much those folks got. So that gives you a sense of how much money is in play with this funder. And if they're too small, you might say, not necessarily worth my trouble. Let me find somebody bigger. And actually, this next bullet relates to that. Depending on your research, you may say, okay, I can make this work, but not just, I can't rely on one funder to fund it. I'm going to have to approach several, and that's okay. It's okay. It's more work on your part to work with multiple funders, but funders are fine with that. And you can mention to them that sometimes people will say, is it okay to tell them I'm also approaching another foundation? Like, absolutely. Because they often know that, okay, I like this project, but I can't fund the whole thing. So they're relieved to know that you are also talking to other funders because what they don't want to be is in a position of giving you a grant and then you can't raise the rest of the money, and so the project never takes off. They want the project to take off too, so it's okay to let them know that you're approaching others. One thing that's handy as you think about approaching funders is having a standard letter of intent that you can adapt. So, as I mentioned, not every foundation requires a letter of intent, but many do. And even if a foundation doesn't require it, it's a good kind of discipline. It's a good to have a 1 or 1.5 page description of here's who we are and here's what we do and here's how much money we need. It's a good sort of just practice to have something that is clear cut like that, that tells your story. Because but if the foundation requires a letter of intent, then it's good to have a standard one so you don't have to keep rewriting it for every occasion. You can just adapt it as needed. And it should be like a page or two. Just think about that pile on my desk. Nobody wants to read 10 pages of a letter of intent. They want it to be like short and sweet and punchy. So, and I know that this series will give you more information about the letter of intent. And even on the internet, you can get examples of them that you can turn to. And Amber has examples as well that she can share with you. Another tip is be responsive. Uh, when in my one of my old jobs, when I was the CEO of Grant Makers in Health, not only were we raising money but from foundations, but we were working directly with foundations. And I would often reach out to potential speakers and say, I would like you to speak on a webinar, to a bunch of funders. This is an opportunity for you to tell them more about your work, and hopefully some of them will want to fund you later. So maybe we can't pay you an honorarium, but we can give you the exposure that's going to help you. And I can't tell you how many times I would not get a response to my email. And I know that people are overwhelmed, and I know that in nonprofit life is hectic, and often you are a 1 or 2 person shop. You're trying to do everything, but it's just really, really important to be responsive, because if you are not responsive, don't answer email or voicemail promptly, it makes the funder think you're not really committed to whatever the project is. And they makes them wonder, oh, is this how it's going to be, me reaching out and then not hearing? It's a disincentive for them to communicate, to connect with you. So you want to make it easy to connect with you. And then my third tip is what I referred to earlier. Please ask for what you need, because they people talk about that sort of scarcity mindset in nonprofits. Uh, there is plenty of money. I just keep saying, there's plenty of money out there, and you're entitled to ask for what you need, because if you don't, and if you try to launch a project with less than what you need, then you're just getting yourself into problems and into troubles. You're setting yourself up in a sense. So you want to set yourself up for success. Now to just talk a bit about the current funding environment. I don't have to tell you, it's challenging. My experience is, at least in California, you do have these large progressive foundations that are continuing to support like birthing and doulas and midwives and other health-related projects. Here on the East Coast where I live, it is really a grim scenario because we don't have the same number of large health-related funders. But everybody is affected by what's going on in Washington right now. And, all of the slashes to federal budgets mean all those slashes mean that there's increased competition for foundation dollars and state dollars. I told Amber the Urban Institute, with which I'm affiliated, which is a DC-based organization, is talking about we're going to turn to California for funding. Um, and we don't even have an office in California, but that just gives you a sense of how people are turning to foundations for support these days. And unfortunately, there was an uptick in funding for organizations of color, for people of color, for women of color after George Floyd, after 2020. That money has largely disappeared. And that's left many organizations in really dire straits as they try to compensate for that funding downturn. So, just thinking about those challenges, um, some things you need to keep in mind is, first of all, have a plan B budget that can carry you through slumps. And what I mean by that is that Grantmakers in Health, as I mentioned, we were a big national organization that was funded by the foundations. um, we would, every year when we presented our budget to our board, we would have a plan B budget. We would basically say, here's how much money we hope to raise, but if we don't raise that money, here's like the minimum we need in order to keep the doors, the lights on and the doors open. And that's just a good discipline to know what's the minimum that you can run on and have some ideas about how can we raise that minimum. And that's where putting some money aside helps, even if it's just a little bit. I think the rule of thumb is to try to have 3 months budget, I believe, in reserve. And it can be a challenge to get to that, but it's these days especially, it's necessary to have some money in reserve. One way you can raise a reserve is by turning to your board. So you can encourage board members to contribute and even consider pushing them to make an annual pledge. And one of the ways to have them contribute is to say, we're building a reserve. We need your support to help do that. Here's how much we're aiming to raise, and how much can you commit? And if your current board does not include people who can give, think about recruiting people who not only believe in your mission, but are in a position to support you financially. I mean, that is sometimes it's kind of hard to think about board members that way, but that is just a reality, especially in today's environment, that you're going to have to be strategic about who's on your board. And then this is my last slide. So, just some final tips. If you hear no, which, especially given the competition today, you may well hear no. I'm here to tell you, do not give up. Because you just can't. You can't give up because you have people you're trying to serve. You have a legitimate mission that you are carrying out. For one thing, maintain a relationship with that funder. Even if they tell you no now, that doesn't mean no forever. So by maintaining a relationship, I mean add them to your newsletter. If you have a newsletter, add them to it. If you don't have a newsletter, Amber can help you with that. Keep them on your newsletter. Send them postcards. However you reach out to your potential supporting audience, maintain a relationship. Invite the funders to your meeting. If you have gatherings with your grantees or gatherings with your peers, consider inviting them so that they can get to know you better. You're also allowed to ask, why were you turned down? and to get more information from them about how they saw your letter or proposal as falling short. That can they a good funder will give you that information, and that can be a learning conversation. And you also want to learn if you can try again, if you can approach them again, and how. Maybe they would recommend a different method, and when. When can you do it? Sometimes they have rules. It can't be for another year or something like that. You can ask if they know other potential funders. I had lots of conversations like that. Who else might want to fund what I'm doing? Because sometimes the foundation will just say, that's not really our priority right now, and then you can ask them, who else might be interested? And funders should know that kind of thing because they're talking to other funders all the time. And then finally, as I said before, don't take it personally. It isn't personal. Don't take it personally and don't give up. You just have to keep going. It can help if you have the finances. At Grant Makers in Health, we used to do all of our fundraising. Like I used to do a lot of it, and the staff did some of it. Eventually, we scraped together some money and hired a professional fundraiser, and it really helps to work with someone like that. And maybe you would, if you don't have to hire the person full time. You can share a fundraiser. Maybe hire somebody who's working with several organizations. But not only they bring experience, they also bring the ability to focus on fundraising all the time. Because if you're trying to run an organization and also fundraise, that's like that's the short road to burnout. And it's just a lot to do. So think about if you can get some help with fundraising, where you can guide the person with some text, and make sure that what they're talking about aligns with your mission, but that they're handling the sort of day-to-day or week-to-week communication with funders, and they're also doing some research on possible funders. And I didn't include these resources in this presentation, but there are online resources like the Foundation Directory. Um, and there's an organization called the Foundation Center, which I'm sure has an office in Los Angeles, where you can go and find out kind of one-stop shopping, like who's interested in which funding areas and these things that I've been mentioning. How much do they give, and so forth. And then on the internet, foundations are now listing their priorities. They list their staff members. Sometimes they have email addresses for the staff members. If not, they usually have like an info or something link that you can use. And one last thing to keep in mind is being a foundation is actually a legal distinction. And it means that it's an IRS distinction, and it means that the organization has to give away 5% of its assets every year. And so the last thing I'll leave you with, along with there's lots of money and don't give up, is that this is their business. I've worked with people who were reluctant to approach foundations, and I would always tell them this is their job. Their job is to give away money. So you're not asking them for their money. You don't have to have any sort of hesitation or anything. They're just doing their jobs. And so, go ahead and approach them and see what happens. Like, no is the worst thing that can actually happen, but maybe you'll hear yes. And I hope that you will. And so with that, I'm going to stop and I welcome your questions and comments. We have about 10 to 15 minutes. Don't be shy. Amber, do you want me to take down the slides so we can, or just leave them up?
Well, we'll leave them up because we do have a survey in the end, so we want to.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I definitely wanted to
Oh, that's
leave.
right. Mhm.
Yeah, leave space for questions. I did want to name something that you had brought out in the presentation. I thought it was just a really good point. Ask for what you want, but also have the frame of reference for what is normal giving for the organization. And I think
Mhm.
that makes such a big difference. if an organization is used to giving amounts at 5,000 or even 20,000, and if you're asking your organization may need $100,000, but if you just do some like light research, you can find it on the 990. We put that in the chat. You can get an estimate for what is normal giving, what's normal giving for a first time grantee. And it just really shows that you are also a partner. It's like what
Mm.
partnership, it's partnership on both ends. So doing that like research goes a long way. But yeah, we want to thank you for that. And everything. I just thank you for the presentation. But yeah, we would love to invite, I'm gonna open it up for questions. Oh, Pauline, how does one, or actually, Pauline, you can come off mute if you don't mind. Give you an opportunity to speak.
So this is wonderful. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to Dr. Mitchell. You mentioned if we hear a no, and
Mhm.
it is kind of personal every now and then, but you
Mhm.
talk about maintaining a relationship. And could you give me kind of an explanation? What does that mean from a funder's perspective?
Well, it's like don't disappear from their lives. I think I was thinking, and that's why I said, like, if you have a newsletter, keep sending it to them. If you have events where you invite outsiders, keep inviting them. Uh, it is it's trying to think of opportunities for them to get to know you better, you know? Because the other thing is, maybe a funder turns you down now. They're saying, like, we don't precisely fund what you're doing. But funders change. And so 2 or 3 years from now, they might be working in your area. And so you want to lay the groundwork for that. So that's what I mean by keep the relationship going. Uh, and if you can, I mean, I'm trying to think. Sometimes, like if you're a member of the American Public Health Association, like sometimes you are a member of an organization where they're going to show up at the meeting too, and so that's another way of keeping, like, go where they are in a sense, or where they're likely to be. And it's a chance. Hi, I'm Faith Mitchell. I wrote you last year. Unfortunately, you couldn't fund me, but I just wanted to introduce myself. And, hopefully you might have a minute and say, like, I want to just tell you more about who I am and what we do, that kind of thing. So it's just trying to find opportunities to keep that information flow going.
Do we have any other questions for Dr. Faith? We got a funder on the call, y'all.
So I
Come
just
on.
thought of some other advice, Amber, while people
Mhm.
are thinking, which is that uh, advice I've given people in the past that sometimes worked out is when I mentioned that funders have broad interests, sometimes the way to approach a funder is almost like, how do we say? Well, you want to look at their interests and how they relate to your interests. Now I'm trying to think of a concrete example. So maybe you have, I'm going to make up something. Um, I'm trying to think of something. Maybe you have a
Yeah,
program where you're reaching out to high school girls and you're talking to them about reproductive health or something like that. So one way to approach a funder would be to say, I'm working on reproductive health and here's what we're doing. But maybe another way to reach out to a funder is to say, this is community engagement. If you read on their website that this is a foundation that promotes community engagement in health issues and the community voice or something like that, you could conceivably say, we work in the reproductive health space. We work with local communities, especially community girls, and we are engaging them, like help understanding what their issues are and also teaching them as well. So it's kind of like thinking in different ways about what you do, not distorting it, but just
Right.
thinking broadly about what you do and how it might mesh with what a funder is interested in.
I hear you. You're like saying use the language that they have to
Mhm.
align with what your
Yeah.
like the priorities and see like how you can align the language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I find it's actually helpful in that regard to tell them that this activity or this project aligns with your interest in
Right.
ABC. You know, it's like
Right.
you just spell it out for them.
Yeah. And it makes it easy for them, right? Because they have to go
Mm-hmm.
back and
Mm-hmm.
defend it against
That's
their
it.
like with their
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, right? So if you
Mm-hmm.
already have it teed up for them and the language is really easy, it's like plug and play and kind of
Mm-hmm.
these ones get through the quickest, right?
Absolutely. You're so right.
Okay. Okay. Um, any other questions? Well, we're coming down on time. Oh, did I see somebody?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Hi, Faith. This has been very informative. Thank you. Um, we're in the process right now of trying to fund making a portal for a
Mm-hmm.
billing for doulas. Is it are there funders who will just fund, a specific thing like that, or is it more you have to go more broad and, talk about doulas and why we're doing all of that, or
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good sometimes I will say, be honest, Mama Linda. Funders can be a little slow in terms of funding infrastructure, and yet infrastructure is, vital to what you're doing. So in that case, I would probably start by at least reminding them this is why doulas are important in my community, and then saying, to work effectively with doulas, we need a portal, you know, and so this funding will be used for the portal, but it really serves this broader, to kind of remind them this broader purpose, which is improving maternity care in my community. So it helps at least to frame it in terms of those bigger values.
yeah, that's what we've done. But
Yeah, yeah. And that reminds me, I'm available after this webinar. If you have follow-up questions, Amber can put you in touch with me, and I am happy to talk, to email. In fact, um, let me give you my email address right now while we're chatting. There's my email
Actually,
address.
yeah.
Happy to share that with you and to follow up afterwards. You have Chantel?
Hello, thank you so much. This has been really helpful and informative. I'll come off camera for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So recently we were awarded a grant from a funder. We've been awarded a grant for the past three, or actually four award cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And they shared with us at an event recently that the same grant that we applied for, usually only 25 organizations will apply for that grant. And this past grant cycle, there were over 75 applications
Right.
for
Mm-hmm.
that same funding. And the representative kind of shared that that's one of the reasons why we weren't awarded the complete amount that we requested for. And so, any advice in standing out, particularly in this climate when there
Mm-hmm.
are, I think we will continue to find more applicants, reaching for the same, fishing basically in the same ponds and then in the same lakes. Um, yeah, any insight or encouragement to, I don't know, even be innovative in how we
Yeah.
stand out above the rest.
Yeah, that's the funder probably called themselves trying to help more, because of funding cuts. I think right off the cuff, my reaction would be to say to lean on your track record. That we have a sustained track record of working in the, when I say lean on your track record, probably with other funders to say, you know, um, we've received sustained support from so and so foundation for this work. We have a strong track record, and now we're sort of broadening our outreach or something like that. And because what will do the talking in a sense is the fact that you are clearly like a reliable organization that's been in the, been doing this work for a while. And hopefully that kind of argument would be persuasive, with other funders. And also that you're not asking for funding of the whole budget. It's just part of your budget, right? You got partial funding and now you need to reach out and get the rest of the money that you need. And that, like I said, that's okay to say that, you know. Uh, and that's why you are approaching maybe a funder that you haven't worked with before, or maybe it's one you have worked with before, but you're asking for more from them than you used to in the past, something like that.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for the time today. Like we want to honor your time. So as Dr. Faith has mentioned, you have her email. This is her website. She is very responsive, and when she shares her information, she means it. So please, if you have additional questions, if you want, you have an opportunity to talk to someone who has the experience that I think a lot of us have found to be trapped in what can be an ivory tower. So I just encourage you to reach out, take advantage of the offer, and follow up. But so if you don't mind, if we could just, thank you, Dr. Faith. It was just a pleasure having you. I just so appreciate your time and your wisdom, and we just look forward to continuing. We have a brief survey, so if you could, you can scan it or you can click the link. I think you can click the link.
Can they click the link?
Copy and paste.
Okay.
Or type it. Yeah, we'll have to type it in. But use your phone. That's probably the easiest. And if you can just give us a quick feedback, then we can use it to inform our next presentations. Thank y'all so much. Thank y'all for making the time today. We know busy on a
Yeah.
Thursday.
My thanks too. Thanks to Amber and Josh, and thanks to everybody who participated.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and the survey is also in the chat, so you can click it there too. Excellent. Thank you.